From the Millersville University Weather Center, this is student meteorologist Peyton.
And I'm student meteorologist Gabe Keller.
Here with Weather Watching. Gabe, we are watching a developing tropical cyclone in the Caribbean right now. It's going to be moving into the Gulf of Mexico within the next couple of days and probably going to become a hurricane.
Yeah, it's been quiet for a while over the tropics with the expected active season, but now things are starting to wake up, and this one looks like it could be a potentially major storm as it's projected to make landfall in Florida over the next couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll flip over to the satellite, Gabe, and take it away with the satellite.
All right, well, you can see here it's really starting to kind of get its act together. It's starting to even get a little bit of a circulation centered around here. You even have convection firing up in the front left quadrant as well, and that's really the birth. And the National Hurricane Center has started issuing advisories on this already, and they're just now getting into the storm with a little bit of aircraft recon. So you can take a look at that and see that they're finding, looks like maximum winds, I don't know, what did you say, 30?
In the 30 knots range. So this isn't quite strong enough yet. But if we look, yeah, they're not finding anything crazy. But again, it's still, in a development state. It's starting to undergo tropical cyclone genesis at this point. Yeah, so we'll keep seeing what the hurricanes are going to be many, many more missions into this storm, as this is going to be another Gulf Coast storm. Most of the storms this year have been Gulf Coast storms. And speaking of the Hurricane Center, this is the newest advisory as of 2 p.m. It is centered down here in the Caribbean. So it's going to be moving up as a storm, becoming a hurricane between the Yucatan and Cuba. And this is an interesting path because it's going to thread the needle in the gap to keep it over the water, and that's going to help keep it strengthening. We have hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings there as well. Yeah. And it's going to be moving up into the Gulf towards the Big Bend of Florida. So, and I do believe that this will be a major hurricane by landfall.
I would agree. I think they're being a little bit cautious since this is the first advisory, and at the time that this came out, there was no aircraft recon. We're still trying to get a hold of what exactly is going on, but I do think we see maybe even some rapid intensification with this storm. Hopefully, with the eye staying over water, Cuba and the edge of the Yucatan will be spared from the strongest winds, but either way, they're going to get a lot of rain.
Yeah, absolutely. Rain is going to be another big story, and really this could be a wind and a storm surge story. I'd be really concerned the way this is coming into the Big Bend. If that path stays the same, you're going to have a lot of water because the continental shelf is very shallow in this part of the Gulf. You're going to have a lot of water piling up on the west coast of Florida, especially to the east of the system. So we're going to have to watch, Tampa Bay. That could be a concern with some storm surges, and especially up in the Big Bend. We'll see how strong the storm really does get, but it is looking like this is going to be a pretty serious storm. As it moves up, we'll have to keep an eye on the NHC. So I want to just say this: we'll jump into some model guidance with the GFS, and we'll back it up a little bit. We were just looking at the newest run, and the GFS threads it through the needle, through between the Yucatan and Cuba, and brings it up into the Big Bend of Florida with a millibar. It would be a major hurricane at this point. Right into the Big Bend, which actually is not the worst spot for this to make landfall. It is very sparsely populated. So this is the best spot for this to make landfall if this does not wobble.
Right, yeah. The wobble would be the main concern. There was a bit of an eastward trend. If you go back through previous model runs, you can kind of see that earlier it was further west, even like towards the very edge of the panhandle of Florida and into Alabama. But now as we go forward in time on the latest runs, you can see it's starting to make that eastward trend. And if that continues, that would be very concerning for Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg. That's a very heavily populated area. And with that bay there, that would make storm surge a very scary situation down there.
And, we have to watch how that high pressure system off the eastern seaboard is going to act. If it's stronger, it'll help to keep the storm where it is. If it's weaker, it could allow more into the west coast of Florida. But also we have to watch for an upper level trough that's centered over Arkansas. Yes, we're going to bring this up on the 500 millibar vorticity. This is the energy aloft. You can clearly see that there is an upper level low. If we back this up, here is what will be Helene. It's going to come up, make landfall. Your big upper level low that Gabe is circling, it's going to capture this, what is left of Helene, and it's going to absorb it and take it up towards Illinois. That's why the track of the Hurricane Center has it gone up into, Kentucky and the Kentucky-Tennessee Valley. Now, that could, for local impacts in Pennsylvania, that could, we may not see much out of this because of that situation. specifically.
Yeah, and I'll bring up some of the ensemble members, and you can see that average. The black line is kind of the ensemble mean, and as Peyton said, if that upper level low really pulls what's left of that storm at that point up into Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, I would expect more of a heavy rain threat as it does that for those areas, and that could lead to some big problems there. But some of the areas, if we get some rain up into West Virginia, even southern Ohio, they're actually in a pretty major drought right now. So it could be beneficial for them. But that's further down the line. There's a lot of uncertainty. But what we do know is that this is shaping up to be a pretty major storm. And I want to call your attention here. So this is from Colorado State. I want to call your attention to this deep layer shear up here between 200 and 850 hectopascals, really less than 20 on pretty much every model. And that's really favorable for hurricanes to become strong and become very impactful. And you can see when it makes landfall, when the sea surface temperature graph cuts off, that's when the shear starts to increase. That's when it's going to get absorbed by that upper level low. The shear will pick up, and with the loss of the energy from the Gulf of Mexico, that's when it'll start to weaken. And you can also see the mid-level relative humidity between 500 and 700 millibars is also very high. Anytime you get above 60 and up towards 80, that's a big deal, and that's very favorable for an intense hurricane.
Yeah, one other thing I want to mention is the SSTs. The Gulf of Mexico, I mean, you can see it here, looking at 30 degrees Celsius. That's pretty warm, and if I pull up a surface anomaly for the region, tropical, wrong one, West Atlantic. Look how warm the Gulf of Mexico is. This is bath water, and this is ripe for tropical cyclone intensification. If I even pull up what the actual temperatures are, 30 degrees Celsius, that is more than plenty of fuel. And we are concerned because this area where this storm is going has had a history of explosive hurricane development.
And rapid intensification.
And this one could very well do that. So it's important that people along the coast of Florida and really the Gulf Coast, down the west coast of Florida, need to be paying attention to this right now and starting preparations right now.
And there's not a lot of time. And this is expected landfall in the next 3 to 4 days. And we kind of really haven't seen much talk about this. The National Hurricane Center has had an area of interest over it. But in terms of the potential impacts, there hasn't really been a whole lot from anybody. This is kind of a surprise to all of us. But when this thing gets going in an environment like this, it can turn pretty dangerous pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the signals were there for a tropical cyclone for more than a week. I want to bring up something called the potential velocities. Now, this is where we are right now, the 23rd to the 29th. The CFS has been consistent run to one that these green positive vorticity, which means rising air, has been centered over the Gulf of Mexico, and this black line, this big black line, and this little black line represents the Madden-Julian oscillation wave, which is it's an enhanced area convection that moves over the Gulf, moves around the world every 30 to 60 days, and that's providing more lift into the atmosphere to allow for these tropical cyclones to be born. So it was no surprise to me even a week ago that there could have been a Gulf of Mexico storm, and surely enough, that is coming true. It is very interesting, how the MJO, there's phases that are really good for the Atlantic, and, I could see, a couple more storms, into early October that look pretty good, given that the MJO is going to be staying over the Atlantic.
Yeah, and with how quiet it's been, nothing's really been tapping into those warm sea surface temperatures. So they're kind of just sitting there waiting for a storm to tap into them. They're obviously anomalous, or very warm for this time of year. So that's really going to drive. It's one of those where we haven't had a lot of storms, but that could end up being a bad thing because now that we have one in a very favorable environment, it could end up being a big one.
I just want to call up the Euro about this upper level low. It's pretty much in really good agreement. There goes Helene into the Big Bend and then gets captured by the upper level low. So the Euro GFS, really all the models are in pretty good agreement with this. All have a pretty strong indication that, yes, this will be a hurricane. Borderline major, I do believe this will be a major, so it is important that people are paying attention to information being relayed by the Hurricane Center and by local meteorologists and emergency managers, getting your preparedness kits ready, heating evacuation warnings that are issued, because I'm sure we're going to get a couple of those. This is expected to landfall Thursday evening from the Hurricane Center, so this is a developing situation that we got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, especially for those in Tampa. I know right now it doesn't look like it's impacting Tampa, but as I mentioned, with that eastward trend, one little wobble, and Tampa could definitely be in play in terms of a bullseye. So pretty much anybody along the entire Florida coast, from the Panhandle down Tampa into areas even a little bit south, I would be watching this very closely.
Yeah, just calling up that humidity from the GFS. Still that's a lot of humidity. Hurricanes love moisture, and this is ripe. This will be a good environment. Low wind shear, high humidity, warm sea surface temperatures. Usually a bad ingredients coming together for intensifying hurricanes. So I think that's pretty much wrapping it up for this edition of Weather Watch. So if you know anybody along the Gulf Coast of Florida, it is important that you give them a heads up now so they can start to prepare, make sure they are ready for this storm. And we'll have more updates later this week with more Weather Watch videos. So until next time.
And important to note, we aren't expecting really any impacts to our area at this time, but this is just kind of a breakdown of what to expect for the Gulf Coast. That trough should take it well to our west. Maybe we'll get some high clouds and blow off from it, but as of this time, not expecting any flooding or any big impacts like that.
Right, and that couldn't change, but we'll keep an eye on that. More Weather Watch videos to come. So until next time, thank you.